All right, you wanted to make a comment, make a statement before we get started, so I'll hand the floor over to you.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, Jesse asked me if I wanted to say a few words yesterday, and I just mean a very few words. I just want to thank everybody for being here today and sharing part of your Friday with us. I know that time is very valuable right now. It's the middle of the semester, and everything's starting to get a little bit hairy. And it's a beautiful day out here in at least our part of North Carolina. So I really, really appreciate everybody coming together a little bit today to celebrate geography in North Carolina with us. And thank you so much for being here. And also, I just want to say, Jesse didn't know I was going to do this. Thank you to Jesse. This whole thing only happened because of Jesse's good efforts. It may say Vice in front of his name, but really he's made this whole thing happen, and most of the things that have happened with NCGS this year. So thank you, Jesse, very, very, very much.
Thank you. That's nice. All right. So I wanted to start out first by just welcoming everybody, our attendees, presenters, and members. Thanks for coming today, and just make a couple of statements. So this is the North Carolina Geographical Society's first attempt for hosting an online conference. And I'm really, there might be some glitches, but I am looking forward to each and every presentation and talking with everyone later at the business meeting. So please join us after the conference. The NCGS is a member organization of academic and professional geographers from all over the state that we at least try to advance geographic knowledge in schools, colleges, and public life. Over the past 2 years, we've been working tirelessly, trying to pick up where previous leaders left off. We're currently in the process of revamping the North Carolina North Carolina Geographer, the peer-reviewed journal, and we have several submissions that are waiting for review. Unfortunately, the coronavirus pandemic has stifled some of our plans over the past couple of years, but our officers have continued to work to improve the NCGS's standing in both the community and the larger academic community as well through outreach. So while we've made several positive changes, there's still a lot of work to be done. It's our hope that we can build on the work of past leaders to improve geographical knowledge throughout the state. So thank you again for everyone for your support and coming to this meeting today. And we really do appreciate all the things that each department's done for us. If you want to help with the organization, please let us know. We could always use an extra hand. So send us a comment. I'll leave my email address in the chat. So and most of you should already know it by now anyways, but I'll leave it there just in case. If you have any suggestions or you'd like to lend a hand with something, we'd be more than happy to take any help you can give. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the paper portion of this conference. Each presenter will have 15 minutes to present their paper, give or take. And then at the end of both presentations, we'll take questions on both papers. So if you have questions, please leave those to the very end. Our first presentation is from Kelly DePolt at Eastern Carolina University, and her paper is titled Compound Coastal Water Event Risk Within Eastern North Carolina. So I'll let you take it away, Kelly.
Awesome. Am I able to share my screen?
You should be able to, yes.
Let's see. Let me start the presentation first. Awesome. Are you guys able to see this? Awesome. So to introduce myself, I am a second-year master's student at East Carolina University. So I'm going to present a portion of my thesis. This is actually the first conference that I'm presenting some pretty new data on as well. So I'm really excited to share with you guys. So for this presentation, I'm only going to be sharing a Northeastern case study. So I'll elaborate a little bit further, but I'm looking to have within my total project 3 different locations. So a lot of my motivation is based off of that North Carolina has been affected by 2 record-breaking hurricanes extremely recently. So first was Hurricane Matthew in 2016, which was remembered for its extreme rainfall and deadly flooding. With most location water levels, there were 3 to 5 feet above normal tides. It was really reminiscent of Hurricane Floyd in 1999. And then the second one was Florence, which made landfall in 2018 producing record-breaking rainfall as well, with over 30 inches of rain being measured in multiple locations. The USGS report showed that floods from Hurricane Florence exceeded the 500-year flood extent. So to show some ways that hazard maps are made for hurricanes, this one is the ABC IRC model, which simulates the storm surge, tides, and coastal circulation. So here we see Hurricane Florence flooding predictions for New Bern. When we actually look at the flooding that occurred, this is a view, you can kind of see New Bern up in this area of the flooding difference from the USGS operational land imager. And we could reveal devastating flooding from Trent River, which reached the all-time high of 29 feet, more than twice the flood stage, which is the height at which the river will overflow and cause damage. So Florence and Matthew impacted a footprint more than 23% greater than the 100-year floodplain. When you're looking into floodplains, it usually takes into account one type of flooding, which is the rivers overtaking their banks. Another part of my motivation was, as a greater part of the research project that I'm working on, there was a flood focus group that was held last February. Yeah, last February. So we got it in right before everything started to shut down. So we had it split into two sections, and it was profession-based and regional-based. And we talked with them about compound coastal water events and how they see different types of flooding within their profession. So one of the pre-focus group surveys we asked them was, in the past 10 years, have ocean-caused, rain-caused, or river-caused flooding became more or less frequent? And what was extremely surprising was they are seeing rain-caused as being more frequent. Nearly 3/4 of all the respondents perceived this. And then this kind of follows the same thing as the more or less damaging as well. They're seeing rain-caused flooding. And this is really important too, because it's not just the practitioner seeing this, it's actually measured in a statistical analysis as well by Perel et al. They found that there's been a trend or a shift in the regime that we're seeing more precipitation within tropical systems, especially since the late 1990s. So this combination of seeing three different flood types is called a compound event. When you have two or more extreme events, so you could have high tides and high precipitation occurring simultaneously or successively, it'll compound and create something that may not just be extreme from the two by themselves. So with that, I'll break down compound flooding hazards. Pluvial is when extreme rainfall event creates an independent flood. So you can have this by localized heavy rain. The next one is the fluvial, where water levels overflow from a river or stream onto the surrounding land. This is sometimes referred to as floodplain flooding or overtopping banks. And then the last one is tidal, which occurs during a high tide event. This is sometimes referred to as a high tide flooding, king tide, storm surge, or coastal flooding. The combination of these floods interacting in physical processes across multiple spatial and temporal scales. So you can have heavy precipitation that'll lead to local flash flooding over a watershed, and then that will lead to fluvial flooding. Or you could have strong storm surge plus heavy precipitation like in a tropical system, backing up the rivers as well, leading to more coastal flooding. So to make the setting, multivariate flood risk modeling is mainly contained to looking at two different types of flooding. So the bivariate cases, this could be looking at where storm surge inundation could occur without taking into effect how heavy precipitation is going to be. Or you could look at the 100-year floodplains, which will only usually look at the floodplains and where they could overflow. So expanding this to trivariate, so looking at all three at the same time, would lessen the underestimation of risk and show where more of the flooding could occur. And this is pretty recent within hydrology research as well. Usually I've seen in previous, it was more of a statistical or financial prediction models. So it's quite interesting to see it moving into a different kind of field or discipline. So it's been used for rainfall, flood frequency, analysis of flood risks, or the amount of flood property, so looking at discharge height. So this will be the first analysis where it's looked at the flood drivers or the types of flood. So the way that I could look at all three at the same time is a statistical method called a copula. It takes each of the single variables and then fits them to a marginal. And each of the marginals can be different. So you can have a normal distribution for one or a logarithmic distribution for the other. This captures the features of each of these variables, and then it'll be able to join them together within another distribution. So to break down kind of how copulas are formed, I found this really interesting and really useful because this is a concept that's not too many are familiar with. I hadn't heard about it before starting this research. So you take the three different drivers and then you fit a univariate marginal. So you see which distribution fits it best. And each of these can be different for each of the flood drivers. So I went through and I determined which marginal fits them best. And then a copula will join these different marginals. And you're able to decide a copula that fits best. There's different families. So I'm not going to go too much in depth with that, but I'll explain one of the families that I've been using currently is a vine copula. So each of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, is a flood or a variable. So it could be one of my flood drivers. And there's 3 different types that I've been considering for vine copulas, the regular, the D vine, and the C vine. And then for grabbing my data, I'm going to use precipitation data to quantify the rainfall flooding, tide gauges in the form of height above mean lower low water for tidal flooding, and then stream flow gauges for my fluvial flooding. With the Northeast station, I was able to collect all the different stations within the Northeast. I tried to find ones that at least had 30 years of data, were complete data, so above 90% of their time period, as well as actually had the data. I had some difficulty pulling from the USGS and then them not actually having the data based off their API. So within my whole thesis, I'm going to be doing 3 different stations sets. It's based a lot off the tidal gauges, as those have the most limited capacity. So I'm doing one for Duck, I'm doing one now near Wilmington, and I'm doing one near Beaufort. So this presentation is just going to be my results from Duck. So these were 3 of the stations. I put it through a R script to go through and find the ones with the highest correlation. And then I went through and did a visual guess to see which ones were within the same river basins or the same flow regions. So I chose Cashy River as my stream discharge, my precipitation station down near Edenton as my precipitation, and then the tidal station is out near Duck. So I'm trying to simulate these different compound coastal water flood events. So what I did was find the daily maximum, or the daily, so the daily sum of precipitation, and found the maximum for each year. And then to simulate the event, so I'm going to assume that the precipitation kind of counts as the event, and then I found the corresponding maximum tidal and stream flow values following 3 days. So I gave it a little bit of time. So each of these dots is 1 flood event per year for about
Kelly,
30
you have
years.
5 minutes. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. And I went through, and I'm hoping to maybe extend this to maybe look at seasonal, so different modes of precipitation and flood events. So it could be either like the strong thunderstorms in the spring, or you could have the flood events from tropical systems in the fall. So what I was able to do was create these copulas, which is a model that'll simulate a flood event. So here I have my real data for a Gaussian copula, which is a different family, but I'm going to focus today on the vine copulas. So this simulates a flood 1,000 times over by creating a distribution function from the marginals. So I'm going to focus first on the R-Vine. These will be the only ones I'll present today. And from these copulas, I'm able to go through and create a return period. So instead of having like the 500-year floodplain, so that'll be the stream discharge ones, and looking at those values. This is extremely new data, so I haven't had much time to look at more visualization aspects of it, but that's some future steps. I was able to look at 50-year return periods for stream flow. I'm still hoping to compare these to current ones. I'm just looking for the current data for that period, for that station. So it's really interesting to see the 50-year return periods. Like for the precipitation, that's about 11 inches of rain for 50 years. So looking at the data and seeing how often that these, the recurrence interval, so how often this goes over these 11 inches, and compare it to the current data to see how the compound coastal water events, when you're looking at all three of these variables combined, estimates the risk better than the current status of it. So that's what I have for you guys today. I wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to present. This was really good to get out what I've been accomplishing so far. And I wanted to thank my COCA-SARP team and my committee, Dr. Stropturtis, Dr. Brelmont, and Dr. Rosanna Fajeda, as well as everyone that conducted that focus group.
Great job, Kelly. That's stuff's way over my head, but I'm really glad that we were able to be your first go on that. That's exciting.
Yeah,
I have a couple of questions for you, but we'll save questions at the end. But thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next paper is from Dennis Edgell at UNC Pembroke, and it's titled "A Fair Candlemas." So Dennis, is everything working fine for you now?
Yes, if you can hear me, I have sound back. I did not touch anything. But you know, I'm gonna try to figure it out. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you. And then I'm going to open up a PDF. I would have liked to have used my PowerPoint that had animations, but 68 slides, and I've noticed that it didn't work well with Zoom or WebEx. And I thought I'd mainly, anyways, try to hit the big points today, anyways. All right, I won't cover all 68 slides. Like I say, I'll try to hit the major points here. All right, so A Fair Candlemas. This is part of a educational series that I've developed that incorporates meteorology with information about history, folklore, culture, art history, religion, and how sometimes legends get started, but there might be a reason why legends persist. Well, I teach an introductory course in weather and climate. And usually when February 2nd rolls around, or even on that day when I have class that day, students will ask me if the Groundhog Day legends or predictions are true. And I used to always say, no, of course not, because the weather on one particular day can't predict the weather several weeks in advance. And after that, I thought that, well, you know, there might be a teaching opportunity here. And then when students started asking me if there was any connection, I gave them an answer where I would say, meteorologically speaking, no. But climatologically speaking, there may be something to that with regarding the upper air pattern. And then when I would explain it to them, their eyes would glaze over and they would pass out. So I thought that I would try to develop a lesson that would fully explain that. Yes, and the idea here isn't to, through my lessons, to prove whether or not Groundhog Day predictions are not. It's meant to explain the cultural history and the upper air mechanics in an entertaining and engaging way. And that's the whole trick in teaching. Okay, yes, this is the second in a series. I won't bother with that. And of course, my dilemma is that students didn't have a lot of interest in upper air meteorology, even though what goes on up there directly affects our livelihoods, our day-to-day weather. Okay, here are the big three questions. And for one class, I had a survey form where I asked these, and they would rate their understanding of these. First off, what's Candlemas and what does it mean culturally? Explain the reasoning why Groundhog Day predictions can't be true meteorologically, but might be based on long-term agrarian climatological observations. And then, but does it relate to this? Yes, it sure does. Explain the apparent paradox that global warming contributes to record-setting cold temperatures. That seems paradoxical. And can you explain yourself? There's global warming, rising temperatures. Well, why is it so darn cold then? Why are there record-setting cold air outbreaks across the United States if there's global warming? They should be able to explain that. To spoil everything, what I found from students is they loved learning about the cultural background and the folklore, but they had a harder time explaining the upper air meteorology, and generally they were overconfident in explaining the global warming links. But I'm going to share with you a good number of my slides that I present for this topic. Well, we know it as Groundhog Day, but in Europe it was Candlemas Day, and very similar to our groundhog situation. The saying was, if Candlemas Day be fair and bright, winter will have another flight. And if Candlemas Day brings clouds and rain, then winter's gone. It won't come again. Candlemas is part of religious tradition in Europe. It's complicated, and well, let's see, it's February 1st, February 2nd, 40 days before that, which would be Christmas Day. That's the date of the purification of the Virgin Mary. And paging down. Why candles? Candles were passed out to the faithful as an expression of faith. Jesus as a light upon the world. And also the pre-Christian cultures noticed the lengthening of daylight as spring approaches. It's just this February 1st, 2nd is one of the cross quarter days. It's also important in the Celtic, pagan, Wiccan, Druid religions of Imbolc, which means in the belly. It's goes along with fertility rites and the goddess Bridget. What they were doing, they were celebrating the coming of spring. But this is only February 1st and 2nd. Spring isn't here yet, although it is one of the cross quarter days. That evolved into, the goddess Bridget evolved into Saint Bridget in Irish Roman Catholicism, which is also part of the story of Candlemas Day as well. All right, so it's one of the cross quarter days. It's not quite spring yet, but in the United States, we have the groundhog tradition. Is there any truth to it? Well, no. Meteorologically, there isn't any correlation to it. If the idea is, if the groundhog comes out of his hole, sees his shadow, he gets scared, goes back in for 6 more weeks. Whereas if the groundhog doesn't see a shadow, he comes out and starts playing because it's going to be an early spring. Well, it's basically a 50-50 coin flip. There's been some attempts to correlate this with air mass weather, or one air mass in at one time, and then a few weeks later you have another air mass. But the air mass weather only lasts a few days, so it couldn't have anything to do with it. And similarly, the juxtaposition of highs and lows, where you have a clear day, so that meant a high, and by the time you have another low and then another high. And does that work? No, that's also unlikely. So the groundhog predictions are nonsense. But and there have been studies done by NOAA and others. Is less than 40% accurate by various studies on this. It's just a folksy tradition, and it's one way to have a little bit of meteorological fun, or to talk about weather and climate. What about climatologically speaking? Could there be long-term correlation? Well, probably not, and not for the United States. February 1st, February 2nd, you're still in winter in the Northeast. What about if you only considered the centuries-long climatic history of agrarian Northwest Europe, where the legend began? Well, maybe. This is my basic hypothesis, is that some winters are punctuated by below normal cold spells where you have a lot of undulations in the upper air flow. And so this wavy upper air circulation pattern may provide some long-term correlation. It may be that a sunny Candlemas may be one of the climatic singularities, like January thaw or Indian summer. Well, what was seen on Candlemas Day was not folksy nonsense to European farmers centuries ago. One thing that medieval farmers did not want to see was shadow-inducing sunshine in February, because they knew that if they had unusual warm and sunny weather, that wasn't going to last, and temperatures were going to plunge again. What farmers would have wanted would have been a slow, steady, gradual warm up past February, but not a lot of temperature swings up and down. Matter of fact, there's a number of these sayings from Europe. A Welshman would rather see his wife in a funeral pyre. Oh, okay. Let me cut to the chase of this. So setting that up, what's the reasoning for that? There's some background for this. Some of it involves the upper air circulation. It comes down to this. A seasonally cold winter would be when you have a predominantly zonal upper airflow, whereas a highly variable winter punctuated by warmth and then cold extremes is when you have an upper airflow that's meridional. It basically work like this. You have the zonal flow, you have the overcast days. Groundhog sees the shadow. Meridional, well, the odds are it'd be warm and sunny. If not warm and sunny, cold and clear. Both are shadow inducing. Well, climatology is a game of averages. The superstition would be remembered when it occurs and ignored when the metaphysical didn't fit. And what constitutes a fair mass anyways? The 1 year I looked at, 2019, unusually warmth in Northwestern Europe, followed by big cold, a record-setting cold. What's going on? It's the upper air pattern. There's a weakening of the temperature gradient between Arctic and middle latitudes. So it comes down to this frame. This is probably where I'll probably have to end it up. When you have a positive Arctic oscillation, you have the cold air locked up towards the poles. And so the flow is mainly west to east coming into Northwestern Europe. But when there's a a negative, there's a less of a temperature, thus pressure gradient, the Rossby waves are wavy up and down, you get a lot more of the temperature swings. So the odds are over centuries, positive Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, the medieval badger, which in Europe it was a badger, not a groundhog. The badger does not see his shadow, whereas when there is a negative Arctic oscillation, North Atlantic oscillation, the badger is more likely to see his shadow. With global warming temperatures, there's a decrease of that pressure gradient, which is adding to the situation that warming temperatures are causing more cold air outbreaks. Thus, global warming causes more sub-freezing temperatures paradoxically. And also, this is a good teaching opportunity to distinguish between global warming, the notion that you're going to have slow, gradual temperature rise, snow will just be a thing of the past, versus being punctuated with the phrase climate change. Well, what direction is it going? And well, more extremes, which would add to further discussion. My conclusions would be that the students love the historic part of it, and that first part of the lecture where was there, they were most attentive and wanted to learn about it. They've never heard of what it actually says in Leviticus, if you actually read it, or the in bulk. But as opposed to the repeating to me of the upper air meteorology a little bit less, although they were very confident that they would be able to explain about global warming. And that's where I'll end up, and instead perhaps field some questions.
Thank you, Dennis. That's pretty interesting. I'm sure the students really get something out of that, where you relay a concept that they need to understand and need to learn, but using folk tales as sort of a prompt for learning about it. Yeah, if we can go ahead and take questions at this time. I'll open up the floor because I'm sure we have quite a few people that are specialists in both of these areas. So if you want to, feel free to go ahead and ask questions. If not, I've got a couple myself.
I just had a quick question for Kelly. That was really great, by the way. It was really interesting. I'm not a hydrologist at all. And that was still really interesting. But I was just wondering, you mentioned that you had 3 different sites. How did you choose your sites? I'm always just curious about why people do the research they do, where they do it.
Yeah, so I'm my background, I meant to mention this. I studied meteorology at NC State with computer programming, and I worked a lot with applied climatology. So I worked at the climate office for a while. So hydrology was a new field to me as well. So for each of my locations, I knew I had to have long time periods. I needed to have a relatively close tidal station, precipitation station, and stream flow station, just because with some of the other flood events, like if I go and study severe weather and localized flooding, that's going to be different than I have a tropical system with large rainfall spans. The problem I faced was with the tidal stations, there weren't many of those. There were only 3 that had the long time period that I was requesting. So that was Wilmington, Beaufort, and Duck. So that was my big constraint. And then I had an R script that I went through, and I selected stations. I pulled all of them through the API, and then I was able to see which ones had at least like 30 years of data, which ones had 90% of that 30 years of data. And then I had a correlation test where I was able to see which ones correlated. And then I was able to go throw them into a map and say, this one is in the same river basin. And then that was the kind of process that I took.
Oh, wow. That's a process. That's really impressive. That's a lot more of a process than, hey, this person's willing to be interviewed. So thank you. That was real interesting.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I have a question. Those were both really interesting talks, by the way. So yeah, my question is for Kelly. So so I am a hydrologist, and I do a lot of work on these like kind of compound events with flooding, but like not from the statistical side so much. So like I'm familiar on a sort of vague level with the copula models, but haven't used them or like have any in-depth knowledge of them. So I'm really interested in this kind of method for assessing compound events. So I guess just kind of two related questions. So the copula models are able to deal with different distributions of the different drivers. Are they able to account for like correlations between the drivers? So not just like between the stations for a single driver, but like in the case of the stream flow and rainfall, there's probably like some correlation there, but then probably less so for tides, because that's going to be influenced by just like the lunar cycles and stuff, and then occasionally by a hurricane or some meteorological event. And then secondly, how far back did your data go? Was it like long enough that you were able to assess for like changes over time in the drivers to sort of like confirm the perceptions by the emergency managers that there are increases in these drivers over time?
Yeah, so for your first question, I've coded, so one of the big problems I found was actually finding a script for the different copula models. So I've experimented a bit. And for one of them, I believe when I was trying it out in MATLAB, one of the steps of the process is to see the correlation ranking. So say there is a higher correlation between rainfall and the stream flow discharge. The kind of Vine copula, so it had like a stepwise. So maybe you'll pair the one with the highest correlation first, and then pair that copula to the other variable. So that was how the different correlations. With this, I think the presentation I had today were from my Python, which I actually just created this week, a lot of those graphics. So I haven't been able to dig too deep into their methodology, but that's definitely, I'm hoping to look into see how they did that further. But that's my guess for that is they did to create those different C, R, and the D vines, they went through and found the rankings of the correlations.
Okay, and then the second about the length of your data record and changes over time?
Yeah, it goes back about to 1980. Yeah, I cut it off because some of the tidal stations didn't go past 1979. So I wanted to keep it one kind of 1980 to whenever they're, I think I cut it off at the end of last year to keep this all of the different station sets the same. I have not looked into see if there's change over time. That would be a really good idea to look into see the just throw up some graphics for the empirical flood events. So I'm gonna write that down to look into that.
Thanks, really interesting stuff.
Thank you.
All right, so I have a quick question for Dennis. I really like that idea of connecting things. I was a high school teacher, taught geography for 5 years, but I really like the idea of connecting that kind of stuff for students to sort of better get concepts that may be a little bit more challenging and abstract. So really interesting. But this is more of a question about possible other sort of cultural events that you could look at. Have you thought about, first question is the maybe impacts of other cultural holidays like the pagan Astra as done in order to improve agricultural output. And then the other question is, why is Puxatawny, Pennsylvania so important to the fate of the entire United States' weather over the next 6 weeks?
For the second part of it, it's just tradition, and once these traditions get started, that's the way. Well, this is part of a series that I've been developing, and I'd be happy to share with you some of my other PowerPoints and posters that I have on other topics. It got started with Meteorology and Myth Part 1 looked at the sky deities of Japan, the thunderstorm god Raijin and the wind god Fujin, and I looked at their mythology and brought in how those deities acted and what they were associated with in legend, and how thunderstorms work. And I looked at all aspects of it. That was the first part. And then I moved to this one because it's completely different, but again, it's a teaching opportunity in the legend. Currently, I'm looking at another meteorology and myth, part 3, Krishna's monsoon swing, which is also based on religion, Hindu artwork, and understanding monsoons. See, the whole thing is, again, if I start talking about monsoons and oscillations in the Indian Ocean, they drop, they start dropping. But if I try to integrate it in with philosophy and religion, there's that part of it. Also, I'm looking at Satan's winds, Santa Ana winds, and some of the folklore that's associated with that. I'm also looking at the Rainbow Bridge of the Norse, the Northern Lights. All of those are in. Also, Huracan legend in the Caribbean is another one, and the another one, Dead Man Walking, which is a Native American legend about multi-vortex tornadoes. And so I'm hoping every year that we have the North Carolina Geographical Society meeting, I'll give you the one that I did this past year. And hopefully, and also I can share my materials with you as well. If you want my video or the PowerPoints and the handouts that I have for those, I'm welcome. Anybody's welcome to use some of that stuff. So next year it's going to be Krishna's monsoon swing.
Well, I'm already looking forward to it. That's great. All right, any other questions for our presenters?
I have a question for Kelly if we have time, but it might relate somewhat to both of them because it's about ocean atmosphere stuff. But first of all, it was a great presentation, and if I had that R script, I would probably save a lot of time on station selection. But anyways, I was interested because I recognized some of your committee members' names, and I've read some of their work about the North Atlantic subtropical high. I was wondering if you were going to do a more broad climate outlook on the occurrence of these extreme events, because I think they would be associated with Nash variability potentially.
That is a bit out of the scope for this current project. I've actually had to cut down on my advisor was like, you don't need to do so much. But I feel that I think there is some broader work being done on this project. We have quite a team. I think there's a lot being done on economics based on these compound coastal water events. But I'm not sure if there's any specifics on a larger climate modeling look on it.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more question if somebody would like to jump in. All right, well, thank you all very much. That was wonderful. I really enjoy sort of the two sides of it. Here we have Dennis with something very interesting that's unique, sort of a teaching, a way of teaching complex concepts, and then Kelly's sort of first chance and first opportunity to present some new research. That's pretty exciting stuff. So I'm glad you were able to do it with us this spring. Give us about 2 or 3 minutes. We're going to make sure that we've got the breakout rooms set up. Here in just a second, I'll introduce everybody. But give us about 2 minutes or so, and we'll make sure that everything's set up properly, okay? Okay, I believe I just opened up the rooms, so you should be able to go back and forth. Before you do that, let me double check and make sure that I can see Julia and Jamina's stuff. Yeah, so if you're interested, Julia Cardwell's poster is on a national flood insurance program after participation after major hurricanes in North Carolina, and she's in breakout room 1. Jamina Olson, her poster is Disymmetric Mapping of 2016 Population of Washington, D.C. using hyperspectral imagery, and she's in breakout room 2. So if you're having trouble moving into different rooms, please let us know, but you should be able to bounce back and forth fairly easily.
And like I said, if your client's not letting you do that for some reason, and you know, the ways of the Zoom are myriad and strange, just let me know and I'll pop you back and forth too.
Unfortunately, due to recording issues with the individual breakout rooms, we were unable to place the recordings of the poster presentations in this extended presentation. Apologies for that, and we do certainly appreciate the individuals we had involved in the poster presentations, and we look forward to hearing more about your research at a later time. So with this, we'll go ahead and move directly to the keynote speaker, Jeff DeQuattro with the Nature Conservancy. Our keynote speaker today is Jeff DeQuattro. He is the Director of Restoration in the Gulf of Mexico for the Nature Conservancy. He currently works in Mobile, Alabama, and specializes in coastal resilience, oyster restoration, and water use. He earned a degree in environmental studies from UC Santa Cruz and has worked for the Nature Conservancy since 2009. And he was initially hired to manage a $3 million Recovery Act project to restore roughly 1.5 miles of oyster reef in Mobile Bay, but quickly took on a leadership position in the organization after the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill devastated both marine and aquatic life in the Gulf of Mexico. Since then, he has been an integral part of habitat restoration projects throughout the Gulf. So I think we're honored, the NCGS is honored to have Jeff as our keynote speaker today. And I'll hand the floor over to you, Jeff. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. That was a great introduction. I'm honored to be here, and thanks for inviting me. I was able to listen in on a little bit of the beginning and on the breakout, and a lot of the work that we're doing is very relevant to the science and research that everyone here is doing, and I appreciate those efforts, and it's really good to see the tie-in. I apologize, it's kind of bright. I don't know if it's washed out for you. I have a new camera set up, so the sun is actually shining too. I'm bouncing off a wall in front of me, so maybe that's it. I'm in my COVID office, which is my buddy's workshop that he's never here. He's actually out of town filming for a TV show right now. He's a professional carpenter. And so he lets me use his shop. So thanks for inviting me. And I've got a bunch of slides here we're going to go through, and hopefully I may speed through a few of them to focus on some of the more relevant issues related to a lot of the talks that were here. I also was hoping to hear about. I was wondering if we'd hear anything about Godzilla in one of the earlier talks about the legends and how that relates to science. If anybody's seen the most recent Godzilla movie, that's a big part of that legend. And anyway, I thought that was very interesting. So let's see. Okay, so I work for, like Jesse said, the Nature Conservancy. We have a chapter in each state, and each state has its own board of trustees. And then we also have like an overall organization, like a world organization. So we are worldwide. And then we also have these regional teams, and that's what I'm part of, is the Gulf of Mexico Whole Systems Program. And so I don't work for any of the particular states, but what I do is I add capacity to what they're able to do in terms of the restoration projects and the planning and engineering and the deployment of all these projects. And we help in other ways like fundraising and writing grants. And that's sort of how we're connected. So we're a small strategic team that really has a little bit more freedom and flexibility to work across our 5 Gulf state boundaries. And so we do a lot, obviously. We got our start as a land conservation organization, and about 15, 20 years ago, we started making a shift towards protecting people and nature. And so that has been a big focus of my work and the work of us in our group in the Gulf. So I wear 2 main hats, kind of. So I'm, like I said, the director of restoration for our program. That's sort of my main title, but right now I'm also the Gulf Corps program director. And I'll share some more. That's what that video is all about. It's a really cool program. It's one of the favorite things that I do, that I've ever done. And it's just about inspiring young adults to then dedicate their lives to protecting and conserving nature through different means. And it's a really cool program. And we're about halfway through an 8-year, $20 million funding stream for that project. And so, it's hard to kind of explain what I do to people sometimes. And I know you've all seen this meme probably. And so, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that's like what I really do. That's what my workspace looks like in front of me here. And that's mostly lately because we have travel restrictions because of COVID, but I typically spend about 30% of my time in the field. And it's to go see my Gulf Corps crews and all the projects that we're putting in the water and in the marshes. And so I wanted to shift and talk about one of our coastal resilience efforts, because that's really a major part of our work. And Chris Shepard, Dr. Shepard, she is our director of science. So I'm director of restoration, she's director of science, and she really helps to coordinate the science and planning in order to guide the work that we do. And so I am sort of like in the back seat on the science and the planning, even though I'm part of it. And then where I come in is I then implement that science through contracts and proposals and project management and partnerships. And so I wanted to show you some of these slides because I thought it was very, very relevant. Obviously, we know that habitats and species provide protection for us, for people. And so without these things, we see that there's a lot of damage. And one example is a seawall. A lot of people opt to put in a seawall thinking it protects them from the waves, when in fact it adds no better protection than a natural shoreline, or even a shoreline protected then with natural features like mangroves, oyster reefs, marshes, and dunes. Those are all things that we use as opportunities and nature-based solutions to coastal protection. And like I said, we really, the Nature Conservancy had to shift because land conservation alone wasn't enough to really, change the trajectory of where we were going with, preserving important habitats and protecting biodiversity. People are part of the biodiversity, whether we like it or not. And there are, major issues with potentially displacing underrepresented communities. Communities are often disproportionately impacted by storms and flooding and whatnot. And making sure that they have a seat at the table in the planning and the understanding and they understand the risk that they face. And so the programs that we've done, we've done over 100 communities Chris and I have helped several communities internationally and in Central America and Australia to really help implement a lot of these ideas to use nature-based solutions to do a number of things, and really trying to make that relevant through just developing partnerships and increasing the portfolio of the projects and the planning and the science and that sort of collaboration between stakeholders is needed to get these things done. And then we also had to prove that nature-based solutions or in key habitats actually do protect people from storms and flooding. And so there's been some mangrove studies in South Florida where 1.5 billion in avoided property damages due to that mangrove buffer that existed between those communities and the people that live there. And so we're able to start doing that more and more for other habitat types, and we're starting to look more at the impacts that storms are having on the natural infrastructure and where insurance claims then line up with the damages. And so if we can, in a lot of cases, the marshes were not damaged. They held up really well during the hurricanes. And some were damaged, and most of them came back, and some did not. And so we're trying to understand why some did not, and if adding, helping that marsh along a little bit would really help it come back to where it should be quicker. And so looking at where we can improve our green solutions, natural infrastructure solutions, living shorelines, dune rebuilding, dune restoration, dune field restoration, sediment placement in the environment, to then, because a lot of these areas lack a sediment supply. And so we just completed this Hurricane Michael study. It's just phase 1, and and you can. So I'm not going to read these to you here, but one of the key takeaways here for us is that hardened shorelines don't provide more protection or higher recovery from a storm than a vegetated shoreline, and that if you have more green space directly around a resident or a community, it increases the likelihood that they will more quickly recover. Which it means better coastal resilience is also the ability to respond. And so, one of the things I do a lot is implement a lot of these things. This is not actually a project that I implemented, but this is a project in Alabama, in Bayou La Battery. And so this is the state docks in Bayou La Battery. And I know that Forrest Gump was not actually really filmed in this bayou. I think it was in South Carolina or something. But this is where it would have taken place had it been, had it actually been here. And so there's a big community here, Bayou La Battery. It's it's a lower income household income area, very susceptible to flooding, low lying. Of course, it's very flat here. And so this is a project that we conceived during the oil spill, when we knew that there would be fines and opportunity to do coastal resilience type of projects. And this project has been about 10 years in the making. And we just finished it before this hurricane season this year. And then 2 hurricanes went right over it, right as soon as we finished. But this is sort of the transformation. This is more the rendering. I didn't have time to get some actual aerial photos, but we do have someone that takes aerial photos pretty regularly. But it held up really well during Sally, because the winds were coming out of the north, and the north is towards the top of the photo. And so it pushed all the water out. And so it didn't have any wave impacts from Sally, but Zeta came through and just hit it dead on. And so not a lot of the plants, about half the plants that we had just planted got washed away, but they were replaced in about a week. And so everything seems to be fine, and it recovered very quickly. And so we had a volunteer workforce that went out and did that. And I'll show you that this is the before and then the after. And the docks portion has not really been cleaned up yet, but the project is in. It's called Lightning Point, if you want to look it up. It was funded by National Fish and Wildlife Foundation through the Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund, which was a fund set up from the criminal fines from the oil spill. It was a $4.5 billion fund. So one of the other things we do is incorporate a lot of the mapping and insurance claims and different tools for exploring potential impacts from doing restoration. And so we have coastalresilience.org. It's a really cool resource. And there's lots of things that you can do on this. There's a, let's see, I'm going to actually do a new share. Can you see the map on the screen? Okay. So this is the coastalresilience.org. North Carolina has a lot of coastal data in here, and you can do a lot of things like the community rating system. You can see like what counties are participating in the community rating system. And so I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but there's lots of other things too, like the Restoration Explorer. And so you can, look at these different restoration options, and you can adjust the sort of, levels of salinity, environmental conditions to meet what your site is. And then you can adjust these different values to then sort of predict what the restoration might do. And a lot of this is really used for proposals. Excuse me. And but it's free, and open for other people to use. You can overlay lots of stuff in here. There's lots of community planning layers in here. We have, I think, nearly every state on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast in this and other parts, and some other countries as well. And so we also take a lot of this data, the flood data, and look at future habitat, habitat migration, and that can help with community planning efforts as well. Excuse me. So let me go back to my presentation here. And so back to the community rating system. I don't know if everyone is familiar with this or not, but in 1990, it's taken a long time to figure out how this would actually work. But there's been a community rating system program for FEMA where if you install some nature-based solutions by preserving open space in the floodplain and doing other things, protecting shorelines, you can actually reduce your insurance costs for a community. And so counties or municipalities can participate in this, and there's quite a few reductions. And so you can get a premium reduction on the flood insurance by getting the higher number of points. that are listed in the manual, right? And as your green spaces go up, basically your flood risk and flood insurance premiums go down. And there's lots of different things like, stormwater treatment areas, floodplain protection, installing living shorelines, shoreline protections, and then even park preservation is gets you a lot of points. And there's a lot of communities that are participating in this. The problem is that it's expensive and you have to hire someone to do this. Like you have to hire a community rating system manager to do it. And so we're trying to make it as easy as possible for communities to do this. And this is a city of Biloxi, which is fairly close to Mobile. It's about an hour drive from here. And they participate, and they've put 2,500 acres into conservation or into green space, so it's ineligible for building or development, and that gives them 347 credits. And so that's not a lot of land. There are a lot of other things that people can do. It's all relative really to the size of your county or size of your area. And let's see. And so there's another thing we look at is how do the CRS points overlap with our work and the work of our partners, like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who owns a lot of land, the U.S. Forest Service that owns a lot of land, and even some of our conservation easements, which are owned by private individuals. And there's other opportunities through USDA. And so we're trying to link these things and overlay these things to really find the highest value output for these potential projects. And so like one project, 100 acre project gives you 15 points, and like that's pretty easy. That's fairly easy. And so that's sort of our multi-layered approach to doing the conservation and the restoration stuff that then I come in and we implement based on the science and this planning that we do. And I encourage you to go check that out, coastalresilience.org, and use it. And we always try to find ways to update it. It's like we have to find a new grant every time it needs an update, and so that's hard to do. But I think getting opportunity to improve these tools is really a great collaboration opportunity as well. And so now I'm going to talk about Gulf Corps. How are we doing on time?
We're okay. You could take another 5 or 7 minutes if you'd like.
Okay. So Gulf Corps, this is my project. This is one of the things I do. And this is a really fun project. And what is Gulf Corps? Well, it's the Conservation Corps program. We're funded by the oil spill. We've gotten 8.6 million for 4 years so far. We're in the 4th year right now, but we're wrapping it up. We will hear in April, end of April, if our next 4 years is approved for about $11.3 million. And that will keep us going for another 4 years. It's looking good. It's kind of a official vote is, our project is a package of 50 projects that are all the states have sort of already agreed upon. And this is almost a formality at this point, we hope. And so it's looking like we'll start year 5 in September. And so we ramped this up. The 4th year, this year was unexpected because there was a gap in the funding. We were supposed to already know about this next 4 years, but there was a huge gap in that funding. And so we got an additional $1.6 million to help this 4th year, which is about 1/3 of our typical budget. And so we have these crews of young people across the Gulf, and we do lots of work, and we have lots of partners. what's kind of cool about this is I do all the project planning for our work, but I have to do very little because what we do is work with the state agencies and federal agencies and all the land conservation groups that are out there, and really use their expertise and their staff capacity to really guide our work. So we don't have to do a lot of the science and the planning and the conservation because it's already been done by our partners. And what we're doing is providing a highly skilled workforce to then come in and implement that those projects. And this is the type of typical projects that we're doing. And Gulf Corps is meant to be a workforce to help implement the larger projects that are then funded through the oil spill, because there's like $15 billion that we have to spend in the next 12 or 15 years. And so that's a lot of money, and we don't have the workforce for it here. This is just a quick look at our goals so far. Like I said, we're still in the middle of year 4. Our numbers are still coming in, but we've exceeded our goals very significantly, like 22% at this point. And then I've actually heard recently that in this year, we could see instead of a year of about 5,000 acres, we could see 20,000 acres this year because we were able to get additional training that allowed for us to do more prescribed fire. And so we're having a much bigger impact than we thought we were. And that's great, right? We're the Nature Conservancy. We're getting a lot of work done. That's what we're supposed to do. But one of my favorite parts of it is the people. And because we're really targeting the local people in the community. So like I said, we have 11 crews across the Gulf based in different cities like Corpus Christi, Galveston, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Biloxi, Gulfport, Mobile, Pensacola, Panama City, and Apalachicola, Florida. And so those people are from those communities. And so a lot of these crews go home at night. It's not like a typical conservation corps where you think you have to camp and you make like $4 an hour. And the only way you can afford it is if you have like family support to do it. If we pay closer to a living wage, we're going to start paying more next year. This is meant to really target and be a reflection of the diversity of the community that was impacted by the spill, mostly economically, but also environmentally. And so I should have clicked to this this slide. This is our typical program that's been the first 4 years. We hope to increase our stipend to $15 an hour through recent AmeriCorps funding. That was $1 billion that was released to AmeriCorps yesterday when the president signed the relief bill. And that $1 billion is going to go directly into programs like this. We hope we can benefit from it, and we think we can, to increase our living stipend, because typically these members can only participate if they're wealthy, and that usually limits the diversity of it. And so here are our demographics, which is fairly representative of the communities. We can do better, and we're striving to do better with that. And we're implementing things in this next grant cycle that would really better represent the native peoples in the area, but also a better ethnic divide of what our communities are. Mobile is, for instance, 50% African American, and so we should be doing better. This is overall, and so it is different across the Gulf, but we are working on that, and we are working on ways to improve our justice, equity, diversity and inclusion efforts. JEDI. These are the education levels typically of our members. And so we've had about a dozen people that have gotten their high school diploma through the program. And we have a lot of people that are fresh out of college who then are getting direct careers with a 4-year degree. And so they're going into careers that would typically a graduate degree would be, desired for that entry level. However, with the experience that they're getting and all the training that they're getting, they're now out competing people with graduate degrees in many cases for some of the jobs. One of the key training elements that we do not have the time to do is GIS, which is something everybody wants. And you can't have everything right, but we still do get passed up. A lot of our members get passed up because we don't have GIS training. So we are going to be working on like a very short-term certificate to get some basic GIS training for our members in the coming years. Most of our members come from very low income households, and that is it is really great for the people who come from high income households to be around this, and the sort of impressions that our crews make on each other is really impactful. And then they go through all this amazing training together and they get paid to do it. They don't have to pay anything, and they get all these federal level trainings. And so those trainings with the S's and the L's in front of them, those are federal level certifications that only federal employees can get, or employees of the Nature Conservancy, because we're the only non-federal agency that has access to this federal tracking system. And so that's it about Gulf Corps, except I wanted to show the video, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free. I think it worked earlier, so we should be good to go.
Okay, I'll come back to the book recommendation and stuff at the end. Share.
I was born and raised in Apalachicola, Florida. I did everything you can name that a cola girl would do. I fished, I shrimp, I oyster. I did everything basically on the water. When I was younger, I never knew how much the bay had a big impact on our life. And then the oil spill came.
In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded, dumping more than 200 million gallons of crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It devastated 16,000 miles of coastline, seriously impacting the economy and the environment of the Gulf Coast. For already struggling communities like Apalachicola, Florida, it was a crushing blow.
My stepdad, he works in a seafood house, and once the oil spill came, he didn't have work for a good 6 months. So that made me go get a job. I was 15. I got off the school bus every day. Then I went right to work, got off at 11, and then had to get right back up at 6 o'clock in the morning for school. I didn't get my diploma.
Then, in 2012, the Restore Act set up a trust fund using billions of dollars in fines from the BP settlement dedicated to rebuilding Gulf Coast communities. The fund helped create Gulf Corps, a network of conservation teams tasked with restoring coastal resources and creating jobs. Guided by the Nature Conservancy's experience and expertise, the benefit of Gulf Corps is twofold: for the local community and for their natural environment.
We're doing this by hiring young adults, many of whom are from low wealth or low opportunity communities, to remove invasive species, improve habitat for endangered species, protect shorelines, and restore oyster reefs.
I was scared, I'm not gonna lie. I was scared. I was like, dang, this the only thing I know what to do is being a cashier, count money. I didn't know how to use any tools. I didn't know about any tools. But at the Conservation Corps, I'm gaining skills. I'm getting certified and stuff. I can be in construction. I can do forestry. I can do conservation.
We hope that many of the young people that are working for Gulf Corps will become conservation professionals and impact real change for our future.
It's a great feeling to know that young adults like us can better our communities by taking out the invasive species, building the boardwalk, restoring the base, I can see what major impact it had on our life. I'm learning myself. I'm learning my worth. I'm more than a cashier. I can do anything I want to do if I just put my mind to it.
All right, so just wanted to share some book recommendations from my end. These are just sort of offbeat. I know there's lots of really great stuff out there to read, but just thought this was something I could share with you. I'll send this presentation to Jesse, and he can put it in your report out if you want to. And then podcast mantras. These are things that I try to instill in my work and the people that I have influence on and impact, and things that my stepdad Jesse's dad shared with us. Jesse, I don't know if any of these pop out to you, but Murphy's Law was definitely a big lesson that he helped me learn in 2020, and still part of 2021 has sort of been like the biggest lesson in Murphy's Law for me. And contact information if you want to contact me. And that's all I have. And I think we're over time probably. So sorry for taking up longer. I know people are hungry.
No, that's great, Jeff. I appreciate you taking time out of your day and talking with us. And if anybody has any questions about the presentation, about what Jeff does, about Nature Conservancy in general, please feel free to contact him. I will share this on the website, and I'll send out a report to the link on the website as well. And again, thank you, Jeff, for taking time out of your day and talking with us.
Yeah, if I can just hop in real quick, I just want to piggyback on Jesse and say thank you. Thank you for your time. And as far as folks being hungry, one of the lovely things about Zoom conferences is people can get their own snacks whenever they're ready to, right?
All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next part. Just thank you for everyone that has presented their research and joined us for this presentation. And I invite every one of you, if you have the time, to join us for the business meeting. We will be discussing the future. It shouldn't take any more than 15-20 minutes, but we'll be discussing sort of our financial plans for the next next couple of years. And we're also holding elections for new officers as well. So please stick around. The North Carolina Geographical Society would like to thank the following people for making this conference possible. Please join us for our annual meeting in 2022.